What if going to space cost less than your morning coffee? No passports, no billionaires, just a swipe of a bus card, and you're floating 400 kilometers above Earth. By 2037, space travel became so cheap, it stopped being special. Families took weekend trips to orbit. Influencers filmed dance trends in zero gravity. But something changed subtly, quietly. Scientists noticed odd gaps in time logs, erratic behavior in returning tourists, and fragments of memory erased. One astrophysicist called it the silence between orbits, a phenomenon no one could explain, yet everyone chose to ignore. Until one day, someone didn't come back. And then another. But what if the real danger isn't out there? What if it's what comes back with us? Hit like, subscribe, and let me ask you this. If space became a theme park, would you still buy a ticket? Let's go. By the late 2030s, everything changed. The space race was no longer a race, it was a business model. Thanks to breakthroughs in fusion energy and reusable shuttle design, private companies launched the Orbit Access program, promising everyday people a chance to see Earth from above for less than the cost of a concert ticket. No training, no suits, no limits. Orbit hubs, floating cities in low Earth orbit, popped up like luxury resorts. People took honeymoons in zero gravity. Students attended virtual classes from lunar orbit. TikTok trended with space face challenges. What once belonged to astronauts now belonged to influencers. But the more accessible it became, the less anyone questioned it. No one asked how it became so cheap, or why private corporations offered full coverage insurance for every civilian traveler, but refused to disclose recovery protocols. Governments praised the economic boom. Tourism skyrocketed. Meanwhile, research institutions quietly reported unexplained anomalies. Radiation levels inside orbit zones spiked unpredictably, equipment readings glitched for milliseconds at a time, and biological sensors, especially those tracking cognitive patterns, showed strange inconsistencies after re-entry. Still, nobody listened. Space had become a novelty, a trending experience, not a frontier. And that was the beginning of the real problem, because in the background, buried deep in system reports and discarded shuttle logs, the data told a different story. Something wasn't just out there. Something was beginning to change here. Quietly, slowly, like a warning in a language we no longer understood. It all started with a man named Elias Voss, a theoretical physicist turned corporate visionary. In 2029, he disappeared from public view after claiming he had discovered a frequency pattern in low orbit, something he called a spatial echo, an imprint in the vacuum that shouldn't exist. A year later, he resurfaced as the founder of Nexa Flight Systems, the first company to commercialize orbit tourism. No one questioned where he got the funding or how he solved the energy crisis nearly overnight. Within 5 years, over 40% of the planet's population had registered for suborbital travel. Voss became a ghost again, but his technology didn't. Nexa's shuttles operated autonomously, using AI-driven flight paths and quantum navigation systems that bypassed traditional space agency oversight. The public loved it. Easy, fast, beautiful. But inside classified archives, early mission data told a darker story. Pilots reported vivid hallucinations just moments before passing out. Some claimed they saw faces in the reflection of their visors, not theirs. AI logs had entire minutes of corrupted code. And then came the first silent casualty, Crew A-12. All 5 members were found intact in their seats, but brain activity had flatlined. Not dead, but something else. Something blank. Their eyes open, pupils unresponsive, as if something had been downloaded out. Official reports blamed solar stress, but researchers who reviewed the data privately called it something else, neural desync, a term that would quietly vanish from public databases in 2035. That was the beginning, not of exploration, but of quiet infection. Not invasion, but invitation. And almost no one noticed. By 2038, over 1.2 billion people had traveled to low Earth orbit. It became the new global rite of passage, a graduation gift, a honeymoon destination, a must-have memory. But behind closed doors, neurological clinics saw a disturbing trend, an unexplained spike in memory loss, emotional flatlining, and what researchers began calling echolag, a delay in thought processing that worsened over time. In Tokyo, one passenger spent 6 hours staring at a wall after returning, whispering coordinates that led nowhere. In Berlin, A child drew the same image of a black spiral every day for weeks after a school trip to an orbital classroom. Hospitals quietly archived over 40,000 cases of post-orbital cognitive drift. Some people began referring to it as orbit fog. Still, governments refused to connect the dots. Space tourism meant revenue, employment, pride. But inside observatories and darkened labs, independent scientists shared encrypted files, overlaying travel data with behavior metrics, and the pattern was undeniable. The longer a person spent in orbit, especially above certain latitudes, the stronger the drift. One map, leaked by a whistleblower, showed concentrated zones above the Indian Ocean and South Pacific where anomalies peaked. Brain scans from those zones lit up with unfamiliar neural activity, as if a foreign signal had spoken through the brain instead of to it. But no one could decode it. And no one wanted to admit that maybe it wasn't a malfunction. Maybe it was a message. A signal we were never meant to intercept. And now, it was inside us. Subtle, quiet, but growing louder every day. The breakthrough came not from NASA or NEXA, but from an aging radio astronomer in rural Chile, Dr. Renata Solano. While monitoring deep space frequencies, she noticed a strange interference pattern echoing only when commercial orbit shuttles passed through specific altitudes. At first, it looked like background radiation, but then she saw structure, a repeating sequence, like a biological rhythm. She called it the pulse. When cross-referenced with medical reports from returning passengers, the overlap was chilling. The pulse matched changes in brainwave frequencies recorded during re-entry. In simple terms, our minds weren't reacting to space, they were synchronizing with it. A field, invisible, undetectable by conventional instruments, seemed to be imprinting something onto the human brain. Some theorized it was a natural phenomenon. Others feared it was artificial, a remnant of an ancient signal, still echoing in Earth's exosphere. The implications were staggering. What if consciousness, as we understand it, isn't bound to biology alone? What if space isn't silent, but alive? Not in the science fiction sense of aliens and ships, but as a massive, ambient intelligence we've mistaken for emptiness. And by sending billions into orbit without understanding what they were passing through, we may have exposed ourselves to a form of contact we weren't equipped to handle. Scientists debated fiercely. Was it information? Infection? Or something worse, a mirror that reflected back only what we truly are? Either way, one thing became clear. We hadn't just opened the door to space, we'd left it wide open. And whatever was out there might not stay there much longer. In 2040, the international scientific coalition known as Orion was formed, a joint task force of neurologists, astrophysicists, AI researchers, and exobiologists dedicated to one goal: understanding the pulse. After over 2,000 documented cases of post-orbital cognitive anomalies and several disappearances during shuttle returns, the world could no longer treat this as coincidence. Orion's first mission was to isolate the frequency field suspected of affecting the human brain. They launched the Vega Array, a network of ultra-sensitive quantum satellites placed at strategic points along the high orbit belt. What they found shocked even the skeptics. The interference pattern wasn't random. It followed solar winds, but not entirely. It reacted to movement, to conscious presence. The closer a human got to specific orbital vectors, the more intense the field response became, almost as if the signal noticed us. Simultaneously, AI-assisted brain imaging revealed subtle structural changes in returning astronauts' neural architecture, tiny rewirings in regions associated with empathy, memory, and language. These were not damaging, but directional, guided. One theory gaining traction: what if this field is a learning system? A kind of distributed intelligence, not centralized like a brain, but networked, passive until stimulated by observation? And now, after decades of ignoring it, we've flooded it with billions of minds, thoughts, fears, and dreams. Orion's latest experiments, using controlled orbit simulations on volunteers, suggest the signal adapts. It shifts, adjusts, as if responding. And maybe that's the real question haunting every scientist working on this. What if this thing is not just listening? What if it's beginning to understand? As Orion's data spread into underground science circles, something unexpected happened. Not fear, but fascination. A new wave of thinkers emerged: post-human philosophers, radical neuroscientists, even spiritual technologists. Their message was provocative. What if this wasn't a threat, but an invitation? They claimed the field was not invasive, but integrative, that the cognitive shifts observed weren't signs of damage, but of adaptation. Some even believed humanity had unknowingly made contact with a non-local form of intelligence, a distributed consciousness that lives within the very structure of space-time. They called it the archive. According to them, the human mind isn't being erased, it's being rewritten, upgraded. And those who resist are the ones who fracture. But for every utopian voice, there's a darker one. Whistleblowers within Orion warned that some volunteers never returned, that others who did weren't quite the same. Subtle changes in speech, behavior, even personality. One researcher claimed her colleague looked like himself, sounded like himself, but in his eyes, something else was driving. Surveillance data from orbital zones shows odd synchronicities, groups of travelers stopping mid-conversation, staring toward the same direction, for no reason, like they were listening to something together. Critics say it's mass hysteria, but no one can explain the increasing number of suicides among deep-orbit engineers, or why Vega satellites now pick up rhythmic pulses like encoded breath. And that's the moment we face the hardest truth. Progress isn't always chosen. Sometimes it chooses us. And when it does, we don't get to decide the cost, only whether we'll pay it. By 2041, the shift was undeniable. In cities across the globe, subtle changes in human behavior began surfacing. A new generation of orbit-born children showed heightened sensory perception, faster learning, but also emotional detachment. Entire regions experienced spikes in collective dreams, identical symbols appearing in unrelated cultures. Therapists reported patients speaking in patterns rhythmic, coded, with no memory of doing so. Government scrambled. Orion went dark. And the public, divided. Some demanded an end to all orbital travel. Others embraced the change, calling themselves the resonant. They claimed to feel connected, not just to each other, but to something greater, something beyond language. Global conflict surged. Riots broke out at shuttle terminals. Satellites were shot down. But it was too late. Whatever the signal was, it had already integrated. Vega's last broadcast detected synchronized pulses across all major orbital zones, not random, not noise. Structure, pattern, intelligence, and then silence. Not from space, from us. Cognitive stillness swept across portions of the population, short moments where thought simply stopped, as if something was buffering, processing. Scientists warned, this could be the beginning of a dominant cognitive layer, a new form of perception not bound by language, culture, or individuality. Something faster, something cleaner, not human, but born of humanity's reach. And those untouched by it? They now struggle to communicate with those who are. Like speaking across species. The real fear? Not invasion, but succession. We created the ladder, and something else is already climbing it. Now the question is, will we evolve or vanish? So now we stand at a threshold, not just of technology, but of identity. Humanity has reached out into the cosmos, and something reached back. The signal, the field, whatever it is, has changed us. The data confirms it. The behavior confirms it. Our children, our dreams, our language, already shifting. And now the question is no longer scientific, it's existential. Do we stop? Do we seal the skies, dismantle the orbital stations, retreat into the safety of Earth and hope to preserve what we were? Or do we accept the change and evolve into something we no longer fully understand? There is no clear enemy here, no war to fight, just a transformation already in motion, and a choice that no government, no scientist, no machine can make for us. The greatest threat may not be the signal, but our fear of losing control. Because maybe, just maybe, the cost of progress has never been comfort or danger, but certainty. We used to believe we were alone. Then we hoped we weren't. Now that we know we're not, we don't know how to live with it. Some say we must choose to become more. Others say we've already gone too far. But one thing is certain, we cannot go back. The sky is opened. The code is inside us. And whether we fight it or follow it, we've already changed. Forever. So ask yourself, is this the end of humanity as we know it? Or the beginning of something greater? Do you remember what we said at the beginning? That space travel had become cheaper than coffee? That anyone, maybe even you, could float above the Earth for the price of a bus ride? Back then, it sounded like freedom. A dream finally realized. But now, it feels like a door we opened without asking what was on the other side. I'll be honest with you, this story still keeps me up at night. Not because I fear what we found, but because I don't know what it means. I've seen the data. I've spoken with people who came back from orbit and could no longer recognize their own reflections. I've watched families drift apart without a word, like something inside them no longer belonged to here. And I wonder, what if we're witnessing the birth of something that no longer fits our definitions of life, of thought, of us? What if humanity is only the beginning, not the center of the story, but just one chapter in a much older, much stranger book? Here's the part that chills me most. The signal, the field, it doesn't just exist. It waits. It adapts. And maybe it remembers. So tell me, if given the chance, would you go? Would you board that shuttle, knowing what might be waiting on the other side? Or what might be coming back with you? Let me know in the comments. Because this isn't just a story. This is the world we're building right now. And one day soon, that boarding pass might have your name on it. Hit like, subscribe, and look up. Because space is no longer silent.